Chapter 11. I was bone tired when our longboat pulled up to one of the wharfs in New York. I said goodbye to the Marblehead men and began trudging in the direction of where I thought I'd left David and Ezra. Exhausted soldiers were sprawled everywhere, sleeping in the morning sun. After I'd ambled around for a while, I knew my memory wasn't working too well. I wasn't getting anywhere. I asked around and finally found a man who said he'd seen the water machine. "Strangest thing I ever saw," he said, staring at me like I was strange for asking about it. I found David slumped under a tree near the battery of cannon. Tethered to the dock nearby was the Turtle. In the distance, silhouettes of British warships threatened. David looked up when I called his name. His eyes were sunken with fatigue and sadness. "What's the matter?" I asked. "Ezra's sick." "What?" I exclaimed. "With what?" "Camp fever," David said. "He went down after you left. Lots of soldiers have it." I stood there stunned, absorbing the news. "Did you find your father?" David asked. "Nah, but I saw Butch Hyde in the battle." David's eyes widened and he shook his head. "I knew I shouldn't have let you go." "What about the Turtle?" I asked. "Who's going to pilot it?" Despondent, David stared at the ground. "I guess I will. I'm the only other person who knows how to operate it." "David, you know how hard it was when you tested it in the river? You almost suffocated. It took you days to recover." David shrugged. "What do you want me to do? Waste 2 years of work?" He held up his right hand, thumb and forefinger an inch apart. "I'm this close. This close. I'm not going to quit now. I can't." "Ezra might get well if we just wait." "Not with the fever. It takes you down for months." He gestured to the far-off warships. "All those targets will be gone by then. The war might be over." I felt sorry for David. He looked pale, frail, and frustrated. Then I did what I was getting really good at. I opened my big mouth. "I'll take the Turtle out." "That's nice of you, Nate, but I can't let you. For crying out loud, you're 14. On Poverty Island, I used to get in and practice. I know it all, the rudder, the propellers, the ballast valves, the pumps, the depth gauge, everything. Except the bomb, of course." I stopped for a moment, reflecting on my recent actions. "David, in the last week I've been in a battle, even though I never could stand up to a bully back home. I'm terrified of water, but I helped row soldiers across the river. I think I can handle a little old submarine." David laughed. "You're a different boy than the one I recruited to help 3 months ago." His face got serious. "Nate, it's one thing to do a dry run on dry ground. It's an entirely different matter to pedal across a harbor with tricky currents, sneak up on a 64-gun warship without being seen, submerge and attach a 150-pound bomb in complete darkness, then pedal all the way back. Think about it." 64 gun, I asked, "so you've picked a target." "It's a secret, so don't go blabbing. There might be spies around. The Redcoats have been whipping us bad, so General Putnam wants to do something dramatic. He wants me to go after Admiral Howe's flagship, the Eagle." "Black Dick? We're supposed to blow up Black Dick's boat?" "Yes, Admiral Howe himself." Wow, I couldn't believe it. The little old Turtle, our Turtle, taking on Black Dick and the top ship in the British Navy. It was too good to be true. David didn't share my enthusiasm. He stayed slumped against the tree. "David, look at you. You're worn out," I said. "You look like a ghost." He sighed. "I feel like a ghost. If you take the Turtle out, the currents will sweep you out to sea. You'll die out in the ocean all by yourself." "I could think of worse ways to die." "I can too. You'll be too tired to row back, and the Redcoats will take you prisoner. You'll rot to death in some awful prison." "That would be worse than floating out to sea, but I die fast in prison since I'm so sickly." I should have known that David wasn't afraid to die. I thought for a minute, then said, "I know why you've got to let me do it, David. You'll be too tired to row back, and the Redcoats will take you prisoner, and they'll capture the Turtle and turn it against the Continentals." That got his attention. His gray eyes flickered with the fire I'd seen so many times. I knew he was imagining the British blowing up Continental ships with his beloved invention. A few moments later he sighed and the glow in his eyes faded. "Nate, I'm sorry. I'm not sending you out to get killed. This is a high-risk mission. I couldn't live with myself if something happened to you." We sat watching the turtle gently bob in the waves. "David, remember when we were first looking at the plans for the turtle with Uncle Elias and Aunt Sarah?" "Yes." "Do you remember telling Uncle Elias that inventing is what you could do for the revolution?" "Yes." "And afterward, what we talked about in the barn. You said if I helped you build the submarine, you'd help me learn to be brave." David frowned. "Well, I helped you build the submarine," I said, pointing at the turtle. "There it is. You did it, David, you did it. You've done something no one else has ever done. Now your job is done. You know you're not strong enough to take the turtle out. Here's your chance to help me learn to be brave. Let me pilot the turtle, David. This is what I can do for the revolution." David held his head in his hands. "All right," he finally said. "I know you're up to it. I've seen you row. You know how the turtle works, and I'm a man of my word. A deal is a deal. So when do we launch?" "Tonight. The water is calm and the ebb tide should be favorable. And at least in the dark General Putnam won't be able to see how old you are." David stood up. "Try to get some rest." I went into David's nearby tent and lay down. It was early September and the afternoon air was growing steadily colder. The enormity of what I had volunteered for was starting to sink in. I was going to single-handedly try to sink a huge enemy warship. To distract myself, I began rehearsing the operating instructions for the turtle. "Push the intake valve down," I murmured. "Begin to submerge. Operate upper hand crank to move down. Maneuver under the warship. Push the screw through the tube and begin turning into the wood. Once screw is firmly in place, detach bomb. Release timer mechanism." The next thing I knew, David was nudging me awake with his foot. "It's time, Nate." It was dark and the air was cool. We walked the short distance to the dock where a small group of men stood. Nearby was a whaleboat filled with sailors. The turtle was tied to the boat. "Stand tall and act old," David whispered. "General Putnam, this is Private Wade of the 7th Connecticut. He is highly trained with the water machine. He will be making the attack." "I thought you were going to do it, Mr. Bushnell," General Putnam said. "Judging from the currents tonight, General, I felt it wiser to use a stronger man. It will take a lot of work to paddle out past Governor's Island." "Very well," General Putnam said. "I must confess I have a rather limited knowledge of what is involved with water machines." He turned toward me. "We're all behind you, Private Wade. Do your best." "Yes, sir," I said in my best low and husky voice. As I lowered myself into the whaleboat, David leaned down and whispered, "I tell you to be careful, but if you're too careful you'll make a mistake, Nate. For this to work, you're going to have to make your fear work for you. Trust the turtle, trust yourself. You can do it." The men rowed quietly. I longed for someone to talk to, but knew we needed to be absolutely silent. In the distance the warships loomed ominously. Why did Ezra have to get sick? If he just stayed well a few more days, I wouldn't have to be doing this. When we were halfway to Staten Island, the rowers brought the boat to a stop. "This is as close as we dare go," one of them whispered. I stood as the sailors pulled the turtle close to the boat. I climbed up the familiar round side of the submarine and eased myself into the interior. Brass valves glittered in the moonlight. I sat on the support beam, my face level with the little round windows. The sailors were untying the ropes. "We're casting off, son," said the sailor, and the boat slowly drew away. "Good luck." With trembling hands I pulled the hatch shut over my head. I was on my own. In the darkness I saw a faint glow on the compass and depth gauge. I remembered the day I discovered the foxfire in the woods. It seemed like years ago. With my foot I felt for the ballast intake valve. When I'd found it, I pushed down and water gurgled into the chamber beneath me. Slowly the turtle began to submerge. My God, what if the water evacuation pump breaks and I can't float back up? A sudden panic seized me. With my foot I pushed the evacuation pump, forcing water out of the ballast tank. The turtle began to rise. Of course it works, I thought. Trust the turtle, it's going to work. I pushed the ballast intake valve again. When the windows were just inches above the water line, I closed the valve. Only the conning tower was above the surface of the water. The redcoats would be darn lucky to spot such a tiny target. So far, so good.